Oh my goodness, Matt Waldman. Good morning. Happy Monday. By the way, you can say hello and how are you? But I have
Hello,
things to
how
say.
are
I've
you?
got things. I'm fine, but I got things on my mind. No, we talk about the quiet period, and we are in the quiet period. Quiet period's compressing significantly, right? Like the final mini camp or final OTA mini camp sessions were the first week, second into the second week of June. Everyone had wrapped up. I was looking at the schedule for training camps. The Ravens report on the 13th. Ravens rookies report on the 13th. Veterans
Wow.
on the 14th. Like next week, next Monday will be our. I mean, we'll find something to talk about. People relax, but after that, the floodgates start opening, and it will be an endless stream of tidbits and nuanced information that we'll be able to sort through.
Until
So
February.
until February, right? Like the roller coaster ride begins. Strap up, kids.
Wow, I just feel like I just got off it and the baby had thrown up and like
Right?
and somebody's crying and there's a husband and wife having an argument as they're
I
going off
wasn't
the
actually
ramp.
crying. I wasn't crying. I was just
Okay.
I was sniffles or something. I don't really know.
I
I don't
understand. I understand.
know. I'll be okay. I'm gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay too. People go to footballguys.com. Content from Matt and myself both ongoing. We're going to talk about some of Matt's. He's got a 15 fantasy prospects under the ADP radar. That's fantastic. We're going to talk about some of them. We may talk about more next week. We'll see. My fantasy notebook is out every Monday, just so kind of a roundup of some top stories and how I see them. And as always, go to mattwaldman.com. The RSP, the ongoing issues are ongoing. Your rankings, everything is available. My rankings are up at Football Guys. Matt's rankings are up at Football Guys with full commentary. Matt, one of the few Football Guy staffers who's filling in all the blanks for everybody. I feel like a slacker. What do we got going at mattwaldman.com? What's going on with the RSP right now, this very minute? I could read my email, but I figured you'd read it better.
Yeah, I mean, I've given you four running backs to keep an eye on for the college football season and what they need to really kind of improve upon and focus on to elevate their draft status. I am starting I've already started watching for the 2025 season. I watched Ollie Gordon, the running back of Oklahoma State, last night. I'm going to finish up a little bit of him today and probably start with Quinshon Judkins of Ole Miss. I'm thinking about sharing a Devy draft that I'm in right now, down the line here. And we just had a podcast with Brandon Angelo and I, and we talked a little bit about what we thought a sleeper is, how we would define that, and our thoughts on some sleepers. So we're going to continue that today as well.
We certainly are, but we'll start with some less sleepy things that are of interest. Like there's a lot of high-end players that are, there's been a little bit of chatter about. And, some of them are contract related, some of them, coming off injury related, whatever the case. Field or fucking fading uncertainty, whether it's contract situations, ambiguous depth charts, or roles. Are you running away from that, or are you running into that, or is it situational dependence? Like, prime example, what brought this up in my mind, I was talking about on the radio show. By the way, the Football Diehards radio program will be on 5 days a week starting next week. Football season has begun. Sorry, baseball. Not really. Not really sorry at all. But football season begins in earnest on Sirius this week. Dempsey and I are back 5 nights a week next week. But we were talking a little bit about, like, CeeDee Lamb generally seen as, after Christian McCaffrey, number 2 overall. Contract issue for him. I mean, there are concerns. He's not going to show up for training camp, at least until he gets his new deal. There's questions about Dak's contract. I don't think anyone thinks he's not going to play. I don't think CD's not going to play, but, Brandon Ayuk, there are others. Alvin Kamara looking for a new deal. I want to say that, like, Le'Veon Bell ruined it for all of us. We used to always be able to say, nobody holds out the whole season, right? Or nobody holds out in the season. And then Le'Veon Bell says, oh, yeah, really? Yeah. But what are you doing with players like this? Are you hoping to gain some value? Are you looking to mix, and not like for best ball purposes, but for say you're in a single league and you're sitting there with pick number 2 and CeeDee Lamb comes up, or you're considering drafting Brandon Ayuk if you go running back heavy early as your wide receiver one. How does the uncertain situations affect your draft strategy?
Not a lot, because even though we remember Le'Veon Bell and maybe Vincent Jackson and look at situations like that and think, ooh, those are nightmares, and I don't ever want that to happen to me. At the end of the day, if you're giving that much gravity to your second overall pick, you need to stop. because I think one of the first important lessons to learn is that you can build a championship in multiple ways: the draft, free agency, trades, and how you do with your lineup decisions. And while it's very helpful to have hit on your early picks because they're supposedly your safest picks, if you're drafting strong everywhere else and building strong, even if you suffer an injury or have a holdout to a primetime player as one of your top 2 picks, you can still win leagues. You can still build a successful team. So for me, if you're looking at CeeDee Lamb and you end up getting a discount on him because of all of this, I would take it. I would definitely. I'm not going to shy away from these players at this point. If we get into August and we start to see more rhetoric that says he's prepared to sit out the year, and there's some credible sources talking about that, then yeah, that's the time that maybe you abandon that. But right now, at this stage, if you're drafting in one league and it's right now or within the next month, I'm still gonna take the player.
Yeah, I think and there are some nuance on all these situations. The ambiguous depth charts and roles, that's not happening in round 1, right? That's later drafts. And we're going to talk about some situations here that'll maybe be more illustrative of that. But I think, like in the case of CeeDee Lamb, like if it makes you nervous, there's other really good guys. There are guys you could argue are wide receiver.
Jamar Chase.
Tyreek Hill. I mean, whoever, right? Yeah. Or I'm pushing a little harder on Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. Maybe you are more open to hoping they can make a run at Christian McCaffrey as a running back 1. Whatever the case, I think. Yeah. But the other reminder is the public portion of negotiations are always the most contentious portions.
Yep.
You will hear howling, kicking, screaming. And I want to say I brought up Brandon. The 49ers are famous for this, right? Like we spent a whole offseason, 2019 or 2021 or when was it with Deebo Samuel? My ears are climbing together. Where he spent an entire offseason saying, "Look, man, I'm not playing for these guys. I want to trade. Let me out of here." And they got the deal done the eve of training camp. I believe it was 21. It was July 31st. They got the deal done. He comes in last year. San Francisco took Nick Bosa all the way out to the first week of September before they got the deal done. This seems to be their style, and everyone sounds really pissed off because probably they are, but the people behind the scenes are working and grinding away at the negotiations, and all of a sudden the deal's done and everybody's happy. The other thing is the ruling is now that fines being charged players can't be forgiven, but there's a loophole there. If you're on your rookie contract, you can get away with the fine. So they can go away.
Players have huge egos. The people in charge who are maybe not doing the fine details of the negotiation have huge egos, and they're going to say things. And the players are young, and this is their first time doing it. They're going to perceive slights and hurts very quickly. And I think that you have to understand that the people who are the adults in this situation tend to just they know these things are going to be said, and they just smile and they look back and forth, and it's like they're like the sheepdog and the wolf, who in the old Warner Brothers cartoon that clock in, exchange pleasantries, ask about the family, and then they go to war, and then it's lunch break, and they have lunch together, and then they go back to war. This is how this works.
Right. Also, you mentioned the competitive nature, and it's something I always think about, especially when CBAs come up, and it's the union negotiating against the league. If you think players are open to being pushed around, that's not how their job works, right? Their job is, I'm aggressive, I'm going to come kick your ass, and there is no inches are given, right? And so maybe that's the public stance on negotiations as well. So I'm with you. I'm not panicking on contract situations for sure. I think they tend to get ironed out. There are players I like at equal value. I feel like with the 49ers in particular, Brandon Ayuk, we're drafting him at a ceiling anyway, right? I mean, what you're doing with every player in the first round. Don't get me wrong, but he's going a little later than that. Yeah. But he's going as wide receiver 12. His best finish is wide receiver 13.
Yep.
Right? So maybe he is wide receiver 12. Maybe there are other guys at the wide receiver 12 price range, though, that I'm a little more comfortable taking. Mike Evans, for example, might be more appealing to me. So for sure. So that's all part of the equation, too. Yeah, I try to shift out of my best ball mindset, which I'm in right now, because, that's more as much about portfolios and and who I'm in on and who I have heavy shares of, who I'm underweight on. I mean, there's a lot more goes into that.
And then
I try to put on
you got to put on your
that.
you got to put on like
Right.
your Josh Norris wig, and
Right.
then and start drinking wine and like
I do that.
and eating fine foods and traveling
I'm
on
not gonna go that
jets
far.
and
I'm not gonna go that far.
and screwing up the Rams front office and whatever he was doing, but. I would seeing you in a Josh Norris wig would be pretty funny.
I think was that an Andy Benoit shot there with helping out the Rams? I think was that Andy that worked for Sean McVay for a while?
Oh, he did, but Josh was an assistant.
That's true.
Got to intern. Was an intern with the Rams for a little
That's
bit.
right. That's
back
right.
in St. Louis, I think. Back in those
Fair
days.
enough, yes. Yeah, I'm so best ball bros. I'm with you, but also you've got to, there does come a point and it's usually for me in August where you have to switch that mindset. And for people out there who are just jumping in and getting back in, they're thinking, what the hell are they talking about? Never mind. Get ready for your redraft. And this is advice for you as you get ready for your redraft is don't overplay these situations, no matter how loud and ugly they get. And if they do concern you, there's probably going to be another lane. You can avoid the pothole if that's what you want to do. Who's
the fact that you bring up who's at their ceiling of value, who's at their midpoint, who's at their floor.
Right.
That's a very important piece, and we're going to talk a lot about that, I think, coming up here.
All right, let's move on to a lot of chatter in Los Angeles. Kyren Williams currently going as running back 8. There's a lot of players I like in that range that I've been drafting way more than Kyren Williams. It's third round, though, and we saw his ceiling last year was running back 2, which he was over the last 5 games of the season as he got the 25 carries. And, I'm a volume chaser. The concern is Blake Corum, who I think is being wildly overdrafted right now. Even if I think Kyren Williams is going to suffer a bit, Blake Corum is currently going on Underdog as running back 35 in round 9. I feel like that's, I agree with something that was posted on the website, the Football Guys website. The contingent value is what everyone talks about if something happens. Blake Corum is going to get an 80%, snap share if something happens to Kyren Williams. The question is, how worried are you about him cutting into that volume that was essential to Kyren Williams last year? And are you buying Kyren Williams at his current price?
They're both overrated right now. And I think that really it's because, the contingent value for Blake Corum, as you phrased it, is very well, is a good point. And it's one of those things that we see all the time with the leading rusher who has a talented backup. Way back when it was Priest Holmes and Larry Johnson. I call this the Priest Holmes, Larry Johnson situation where you take the talented back and you draft him somewhere between rounds 8 and 10, even though he may have no real value if the other guy continues to play like he did in previous years. Now, this year it's a little different because when you look at Kyren Williams, I don't think he's going to get treated like Priest Holmes, even though they're similar size, they're similar speed. You could probably make the comparison between those two guys at least on some level, where athletically they don't unbelievably stand out, but they're smart runners. But I think that where they drafted Blake Corum and the way they're talking about using Williams, they're going to use Williams less as a runner and more as a receiver. He's still going to lead this team, but again, when I look at the fact, as you mentioned, some of these players that are available are in the same range. If you want a running back, Derrick Henry's getting drafted after Kyren Williams. How do you? I'm sorry, that magical number of 30 just scares the bejesus out of people. But fuck that.
It really does. I wanted to say too that I mean, the list of guys. It's Henry, it's Travis Etienne Jr., who even if I'm not a huge Etienne stan, I think him getting something similar like Tank
Josh Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs going after him, Isaiah Pacheco going after him. I'm into Joe Mixon too. I mean, and you've got to carry that price into that factor as well. You're now getting into the 5th, 6th round for some of these guys, and I'm talking about Mixon, Rashod White. Another one going after him. We're going to talk about another one of these players.
And if you don't want a running back in round 1 and get one of those other guys, I mean, Nico Collins is sitting there.
Yep.
Olave's solid. You know, if you're looking for just a high floor, Davante Adams, even with the quarterback scenario there, look at what they had last year and what Adams did.
Right.
And you're still looking at strong value. Drake London, if you want an up-and-comer. Devon Achane, who we should probably talk about down the line here. Yeah. I think he's a little overdrafted, but he has a high ceiling.
Still wants some, though. Yeah. I felt like that all along. I felt like we've been drafting Devon Achane incorrectly, but that's not that's only in redraft discussions. In best ball discussions, I want those weeks where he's going to be that dominant force. I want those, and I'm willing to spend up a little bit to get him. So I'm with you 100% on Williams. I think one of the things that I worry about, especially in redraft, is I call it the handcuff premium. There is a price for players that are perceived to be these big premiums, and I can tell you, as somebody who's seen many people pay that for, let's say, an Alexander Madison only to come up short.
Yeah.
It's a perception, right? And a lot of the things we're drafting here are based on our perceptions. But one of the things about the Rams that, we should be mindful of, Sean McVay wants to lean on one guy. I mean, he's told us this year in, year out. Ask Todd Gurley about this. So, this has been his pathway to success. But that said, last year they lose Williams for a 4-game stretch with an ankle injury. They lost 3 of those games. They couldn't run the football.
Yeah.
When he was on the field, all the pieces worked. And Blake Corum is addressing that absence. If Corum fares well and does better and is better than we expect, it'll be a change from the norm if he gets heavier usage as the change of pace or a backup than what we've seen. What was it last year for Royce Freeman, and who may not be a Blake Corum, but it was like 77, turns, right? I mean, they're not looking to force these guys into action.
That's true. And I would say, while Zach Evans is a very talented back in his own right, he didn't get that opportunity. So that's an argument supporting what you're saying. At the same time, he is a rookie. McVay doesn't like rookies usually. And he also was known to be somewhat of an off-field guy. Yeah, Kyren Williams. So maybe if Blake Corum gets significant playing time with his draft capital as well, then you're going to know that McVay's behind a lot of this, and it's not just a GM pick. So we'll see.
So there's one that I feel like is, or one of these running back duos. We're going to talk about a couple more here, but we'll start with this one that I feel like totally uncertain about. Kenneth Walker III, I think, is like not at a bad value. He's running back 16 on best ball right now on Underdog, going in round 7. Zach Charbonnet going in round 12 is running back 41, right at the 11-12 range. We don't know what the hell is going to go on here. It's a new coaching staff. Ryan Grubb comes in, coming off a run in Washington as the offensive coordinator. Mike McDonald's the head coach. I know I'm thinking about the coordinator here, people, because that's who we're interested in. A super pass-heavy attack. I think they threw the ball, had a higher dropback rate in Washington with the Huskies last year than any other team. They play at a much faster pace, too, or they did in Washington than the Seahawks have. And the Seahawks haven't been what you would call pass happy under Pete Carroll. Who were the last 2 coordinators? We had Shane Waldron, and then before that we had Brian Schottenheimer, right?
Yeah.
Pete Carroll wanted to run the football. Are we going to see similar value, or should we expect similar value out of this backfield? And are we drafting these 2 players correctly right now in best ball?
I think they're starting to fall a little. They've been slowly sliding, and I think they're going to continue to slide a little bit, if you ask me. As camp goes on and they start talking up the value of this passing offense and how much volume they're going to do as a passing offense. But Walker, to me, is probably the best value as the receiving back. I mean, Charbonnet's not bad, but Walker in space is a more compelling player. That said, I think that he's the type of player whose upside is limited by Charbonnet and limited by his offense. So looking at the players around him that I'm seeing around him, guys like maybe Tank Dell, Alvin Kamara, Dalton Kincaid, somebody named Anthony Richardson, George Pickens, Keenan Allen. Those are guys that all sound as or more appealing and have maybe higher ceilings in their respective offenses relative to their position than maybe what Ken Walker offers with Charbonnet and this new offensive change. I think Walker's going to be an okay running back too with some strong weeks, but I don't think that I don't think his ceiling is running back 1 territory, whereas all those other guys I mentioned have top 12, maybe even top 5 ceilings. with what could happen in their offense and their ability.
So you bring up Alvin Kamara, who's a player I'm increasingly intrigued by. There's contract discussions with him. Clint Kubiak comes over from San Francisco. Everywhere that's San Francisco, McVay, all those offenses, move out to, they end up, we get really good results. We're expecting the same in Atlanta with Zach Robinson moving from the Rams to the Falcons. Clint Kubiak from the 49ers. And Alvin Kamara, I think the thing that's overlooked last year, he was suspended 3 games, got off to a little slow start, was working behind a raggedy-ass offensive line that has been upgraded. But if we're expecting kind of a CMC-ish treatment or usage for Alvin Kamara, the weeks he played, he was still, I want to say, in the top 10 in points per game, Alvin Kamara. So I'm not giving up on him. He's a player that we'll be talking about more as we get closer to the season. The duo I want to talk about that hasn't been discussed widely, that I think we're not necessarily drafting correctly: James Conner, running back 27, going in the 7th round. Trey Benson, running back 31, going in round 8. I think that gap is closer than it's going to be in real life, assuming health for Conner, right? And we all know, I hear you out there, he always misses time. Okay, yes, a lot of players miss time. James Conner coming off a career best season, however, and all the talk is this week, people talking, Johnny Venable, I think, in speaking in Arizona, covers the team closely, says James Conner is the locked-in starter. Don't think that's changing. Trey Benson is the heir apparent. He's the guy in waiting. I think that's totally true. There's things about Trey Benson I find very appealing. You know what they are. It's the cleavage that I love.
Yep. Can't get away from that. Yep.
But
look, keep the eyes up, Bob. Keep the eyes off the feet, my man.
Yeah. That said, I think James Conner is ridiculously well priced.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, if you play at least 13 games, you're doing pretty good as a running back in the NFL. I know everybody wants 17, but come on. He's played at least 13 games since his last year in Pittsburgh. He's averaged at this point 10 touchdowns, even though one of them was an inflated 15 touchdown season. He's had no worse than 7 in the past 3 years, and he's giving you quality receiving stats most of the time. Now that's going to change. He's been really, since he's been in Arizona, he's been no worse than a mid-range running back too.
Yep.
And so you're getting James Conner right now as a low-end running back too. So you're getting him at a value. Now you could look at some of the other players around him, but I look at when you talk about good value, I mean, I look at this list. There's Kyler Murray. There's a lot of players after him that are compelling. DeAndre Hopkins, who I think will continue to fall a little bit when Calvin Ridley noise comes up in camp and they talk about how fast he is and how explosive he is, and then Hopkins ends up being the main guy. He might be the only other contender on this list, because Zamir White, to me,
right,
they're going to take him out in passing situations. Jordan Addison, who's throwing him the football, good, but how high is the ceiling going to be? Same with Deontay Johnson. And then you have Ferguson and Njoku and Tony Pollard. Really? I'll take Conner. The real question that we should be asking, I think, in this isn't whether James Conner and Trey Benson should be equal value. It's whether Michael Carter has more value than Trey Benson, because Michael Carter is an excellent receiving back who can block and is better between the tackles than you'd expect, and they like him. And I think that they just know he's not an every down back. And his weakest points are running routes and pass protection, and then you've got the decision-making acumen that goes with it. Michael Carter is probably, relative to these guys, is free money that I would be taking as kind of a late hedge if I wanted to, or off the waiver wire very early once he started to go, look at what happens when look at Trey Benson. He didn't get any touches or barely any snaps, and Michael Carter's out snapping him.
Right. Michael Carter, that guy that comes in, with a history of shared backfields, super productive, teammate with Javonte Williams. I think they both had 1,000 yards their final season, and a big playmaking threat too. So worth noting, Matt Waldman. Well played, sir.
He's got that microwave quality, Yeah.
I do like Trey Benson a lot, but I think also that he's more of a down the road play. Yeah. Isaiah Likely, I think, I look at his price. He's tight end 23 right now, right? And I don't know that that's wrong, but I look at a lot of the guys going ahead of him, And I feel like, man, if Todd Monken actually takes and, uses more of the 12 personnel we've seen him do, like in Georgia, he led the nation in 2 tight end sets. If we see more of that with Isaiah Likely working alongside Mark Andrews, you're going to get better than tight end 23 value. Is there any standalone value to Isaiah Likely?
There could be. And it might be a good play, but when you think about the players around him, Tyler Conklin I
like Conklin better.
I like him better too. He's a very good man-to-man route specialist with a top quarterback who knows how to target tight ends like this. Then you got a rookie like Jermaine Burton who could really have a high ceiling. Right. So I look at players like that. I mean, there's not Likely's on the list, but I think that even like Taysom Hill just a little bit earlier, tight end's going to be featured in that New Orleans offense with Clint Kubiak, and Hill's playing more of that Garrett Graham, Owen Daniels, aging myself, role of like the guy out of the backfield who's
maybe like more of a use
passes. A use check maybe, but that's going to get play in the red zone.
Yeah, he's going to get more usage. I think, it's the, probably some plays under center. Like, I feel like there is a range of tight end 2s that I'm drafting that I have a hard time in leagues where he is available as a tight end. Yeah. It's not every platform that he is, but in platforms where he is tight end eligible, I could make a really strong argument for Taysom Hill over a hell of a lot of guys at the tight end 2 spots, just because he's going to get those meaty opportunities. Some of those, shotgun quarterback situations in the red zone where he's just there to run it in. I mean, there's a lot to like about it.
I gotta feel it or fuck it for you. What do you think? Are you feeling the idea that maybe all this talk about Isaiah Likely is so that they can trade him? Because Charlie Kolar is no Isaiah Likely, but he's more of a Mark Andrews who can block a little bit better and is good in zone. And maybe they feel like maybe we can get something for Likely, or maybe they trade Andrews and keep Kolar in that capacity.
Keep the younger guys.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I don't know if I'm feeling that, but I'm just wondering. I thought I'd throw that up there to see what you thought.
I'm just, I look at the numbers. Likely was targeted 40 times. He had 5 touchdowns on 40 targets. That's pretty good. I think the key for me is how much they actually follow through with the whole idea. And by the way, he has talked about learning all the receiving positions, not just tight end, but working in various places in the slot, out of the backfield, etc., splitting out wide. So he's been working all that. But I wonder if at some point the Ravens used 12 personnel 11% of the time last year, and that was like really low. That's not what Monken did in his previous stops, right? You go back to Georgia, that's about all they did, right? They led the nation.
But let's ask you this: who did they have at running back last year, and how often were they running 12 before J.K. Dobbins got hurt in the first half? That would be interesting to see if they were going 12 heavy against the Texans in that first game. And then when that didn't work out and he got hurt, they just were like, let's do more 11 because we got to get our best personnel on the field, or more 10 and 11 personnel. And maybe this year, maybe they do go to more of a hybrid attack, because with Derrick Henry having that extra gap with him could be devastating for run defenses.
Okay, I think we're all fucking on Isaiah Likely having any standalone value, and that was a nonsensical question almost. But I do think the talent.
Know. I liked it.
I don't. I do think it's, to me, he's priced right to be a handcuff for Mark Andrews. Like if you're not paying a handcuff premium here, right? Yeah. You're not paying any extra because he's the guy, and we've seen what he can do without Andrews.
Who's the third receiver in Baltimore?
Right now, is it not?
And that's my point.
Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, that's my point. Nelson Aguilar or Isaiah Likely. Right now, I would say it's pretty even. I'd go a little more towards Likely, and so that's possible.
Since you brought that up, Rashod Bateman's wide receiver for 74. That seems insanely cheap for a guy who's likely a starting receiver on an NFL team. Even if you think Derrick Henry's going to run the ball every single snap. They're going to throw some. Zay Flowers is there. I realize that. Is Bateman a free score player, or is there just not enough upside there for you to have any interest? So fuck him.
No, I'm totally into getting Rashod Bateman at the current value. I'd probably take him over everybody we mentioned other than maybe Jermaine Burton. And I'd probably even consider him over Burton in a lot of my drafts just because he's so good after the catch. He's a good route runner. he just had some injury and they've had some system issues. I think that they've made an investment in him this year to kind of reinvest in the idea that this guy can be a thing, and I think we've seen moments where that's happened. So I'm buying into that idea, and I know that I'm not alone. I know there's a certain guy who looks like he's trying to train to become a defensive end in Matt Harmon. I've seen certain recent pictures of it, and I'm going, Matt Harmon, what are you doing, man? I thought you were a wide receiver. You're bulking up to be a defensive end. I mean, he's getting muscular over there. All
that damn protein.
All that damn protein. But he likes Rashod Bateman too. I don't think he's got any. I don't think he's lost faith in the guy. I think he's still open to the idea, especially with the price. I mean, are you really going to take Derek Carr over Rashod Bateman? Maybe you take Tyler Conklin in a 1 point.
Depends on my stack, said Best Ball Bob.
Yeah, that's right. There we go. But I would definitely consider him there. I think he's a good deal. I'm feeling it.
All right, let's talk about some of the guys I mentioned at the top of this podcast, the 15 fantasy prospects under the ADP radar that dropped, as the kids say, on the footballguys.com website. And we're not going to go through all of them, but I did want to touch on something that I found interesting. Braelon Allen, first and foremost. He's currently a running back 58. Tell us what you think about his prospects.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in love with Braelon Allen as a standalone prospect. I think that he's kind of a player who has a lot of positives, but they're kind of fragmented in his game, and he hasn't completely integrated them yet. But if he can, he could become, probably one of the more dominant producers at his position in any given year. And the offensive line on paper looks good for the Jets if it can stay healthy. That's a big if. But with Aaron Rodgers in tow, you're going to be able to dictate to defenses a little bit more, and that helps the run game. So if Breece Hall gets hurt, Braelon Allen probably has the best chance to come in, and the Jets do things that fit what Allen does well. He's a good gap runner, and I think that there's enough there that he could give you, 8 to 10 touchdowns as a rookie. If the injury to Hall happens early and he plays out a whole year, he could be at 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 yard back from the jump, and people go nuts about him and then find out, okay, maybe he's not that great in subsequent years, but he's good enough to be, he's fantasy good. He may not be reality great, but he can be fantasy good.
Yeah, I should qualify this. Currently, at best balls, everyone we're about to talk about are free square players. You can get them essentially with the last 2 rounds, some of them after round 20.
Then he's a must grab in that situation.
Right, and I feel like even in redraft, if you're investing in Breece Hall, as I plan to be doing, and I'll be investing early, he looks like the clear-cut handcuff to me. I don't think Israel Abanaconda's seems to be that guy, or else Braelon Allen might not be there. So, moving on. You said something a little earlier, and I think set this next one up. Dylan Laube, currently being drafted as running back 68. You feel like maybe Zamir White is not going to be a true full-time, a true feature back, and that he'll remain on the field for passing situations. Is Laube the guy that's going to be on when that happens?
It could very well happen. Amir Abdullah's a journeyman veteran who can do that job when called upon, but Laube is probably equally compelling as an open field runner, and maybe even more compelling as a between the tackles player who has maybe add another 5 to 7 pounds of muscle and could challenge a guy like Zamir White for a lead role in a year or two. As early as next year, I would bet. I think that there's potential there for his game, and he's one of those players that teams get excited about, and they're trying to cool their jets because they've always been once bitten, twice shy about small school players at running back and not sure what they really have. But this is a guy that if you know what to watch on film, I think this is one of those guys that will validate that he can make the transition and that he is a legitimate between the tackles running back in the style of maybe not like Tyjae Spears, but like on a level where if you look at Tyjae Spears and he's going to split duties down the middle with Tony Pollard this year. It's not even like they're getting assigned different duties. They're just splitting it in half, which tells you that they feel like just workload may be a little bit of a concern, but the talent is there to do the lead job. I think Laube will someday show that. And they're already excited about him. Cadillac Williams knew a thing or two about running the football, and he's the running back coach, and I think he's already liked what he's seen from Laube. And And there are a lot of NFL players who've trained with him pre-draft who were like, wait till the team sees this kid.
Led the FCS in all-purpose yards in each of the past 2 seasons, and set a school record for receiving yards in a game with 295.
And we know
Central Michigan in 2023.
White has to prove that he can be a guy in space as a receiver, and even as a blocker, he has to prove a little bit more. I think the door's open for Laube to really get this job as a rookie.
I think so too. I just wonder how much bandwidth there is there if we look at the way Antonio Pierce has run the Raiders. Luke Getsy comes in as the offensive coordinator, coming from one of the run heaviest teams in the league last year, whether that was by design or just due to circumstances. The same could be said in Las Vegas, where you have issues at quarterback, whether it's Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. We're going to have a competition there. I think, a lot of people feel like it's going to be Gardner Minshew. I'm not so sure I agree. And I'm not sure because I don't think Antonio Pierce agrees. And I think this is one situation where you got to watch what Pierce has done. And I think Josh Jacobs was on track to get 80+% of the snaps last year when he got hurt. And then he got hurt, and then Zamir White came in and took all of those snaps. They averaged 114 yards from scrimmage per game down the stretch, including a huge game against the Chiefs. So I think to me, White is a little bit underpriced right now, based on that, but based on anticipated volume. But I do think if there's somebody going to have a receiving role, I don't know if it's going to be Amir Abdullah, and I think that Laube someone to look for all the reasons you outlined.
And do they really? I would joke that looking at their quarterback situation, do they really care that if their quarterback gets hit a lot?
No.
They're going to be drafting for another one. I think Carson Beck might be high on their list, in the future here. We'll see.
Isaac Guerendo in San Francisco, 4th-round pick, correct?
Yes.
So we've got Elijah Mitchell, who has had trouble staying healthy. We have Jordan Mason, also has had trouble staying healthy. I think that's the pecking order right now. Still, it's going to be Mitchell after Christian McCaffrey. I know he's there, people. CMC, and I know also you could read about this in my fantasy notebook. Kyle Shanahan talking, we need to lighten his load a little bit. We want to preserve him. Believe that when you see it, kids. But they do have pieces there. Tell us what Guerendo can deliver.
I think Guerendo is one of those guys that you look at size, speed, footwork, power, and he's got a build that's similar to Todd Gurley. Does that make him Todd Gurley in ability? No. But does he have Todd Gurley's level of speed and acceleration? It's not that far away. And he has gotten better every year. He was on loaded depth charts in Wisconsin, with Jonathan Taylor being one of those backs, Braelon Allen being another. And, I've seen my share of loaded depth charts where guys like Edgerrin James or Terrell Davis don't always get maybe the opportunities, Priest Holmes, don't always get the opportunities that the star gets, that the coach favored. And so Guerendo, played well at Louisville, and I think that they had a system in place where they didn't want to overtax him, so Jawar Jordan certainly got some love and was a nice college player. But Guerendo's that type of guy that, if he can pick up pass protections reasonably well this summer, and that's what you're going to keep an eye out for. If he can do that, and you hear, that he's doing okay in that department, he could wind up the backup on this team. And even if by injury that they have to do it, he could perform well just if injuries, decimate the depth chart where McCaffrey and one of Mason or Mitchell get hurt as well. So he's a dart throw at this stage. He's better dynasty play than he is a redraft play, but he's a guy you're going to want to monitor in camp because the Shanahans exemplify this better than anyone, is that they look at the running back position as interchangeable, that they can find a lot of talent, and unless they have a superstar, the guys behind that, the depth charts are never settled. And right. I think that Guerendo's that type of guy that could give you that Mike Anderson, way back in the day. Where did he come from?
Yeah, Brock Purdy is like an example of that whole mindset you're talking about, right? Like Shanahan was telling his team's owner that, hey, like as early as the first training camp, this guy might end up being our start, right? Like his mind is working in that way for sure. Let's talk about 3 wide receivers here. Javon Baker, I think for the Patriots is interesting. Not the guy they picked first. That's Jalen Polk. But Baker seems like more of a big play threat. Tell us what we should like about him as wide receiver 83. And an offense, by the way, that scored tied for the lowest scoring in the NFL last year.
Well, if you're going to pick a Patriot, go ahead and pick one of the cheapest ones at wide receiver, because you don't know what you're going to get at quarterback really for sure. But one thing that you want to know with all these quarterbacks is you want a player that's a good route runner. And I would argue that of the rookies that they picked, while Jalen Polk has really some nice developmental upside, and he will be able to contribute immediately with certain sets because he's good at winning the ball in the air and playing the boundary, and he's got some skill after the catch. Javon Baker is the better route runner of the two. I think that he's the more refined route runner. He has some issues with attacking the ball sometimes that lead to some unfortunate drops, but they're not a high amount on his plate, and he is a big play, tight window pass catcher against man and can offer some skill as a runner. So looking at him, I think he's a real deal. The reason he's a lower draft pick than Polk was not necessarily his ability, but apparently character concerns. And the character concerns really center around his father, and that maybe that they feel like the father maybe interferes a lot or creates a lot of drama. And there have been issues in the past in the NFL where there are players whose parents or family members have come up to the facility and created drama for employees who are just trying to, keep the lights on and pay the bills and do things. And these people are coming up there over things that nobody has anything to do with. Kind of like, think about like if you worked at, let's see, Walmart, and your parent came up to Walmart and started like going off on the customer service and the management there about something about that had something to do with you, but it had nothing to do with what their role was, at the store. I think that's kind of what happens with some of these football parents, and I think a lot of people are afraid that Baker has one of those. But we don't. A lot of this can also be speculation and editorialization of issues that maybe the guy's just different. Maybe he's a little bit more direct as a communicator. Maybe he has certain differences that they look at and it scares them, and he's harmless. We'll find out.
Yeah, in the vast majority of leagues I play in, there will be no interest in any Patriot not named Ramondre Stevenson, except maybe Hunter Henry, and after that, probably none. But in leagues where both Matt and I play in, he knows what I'm talking about, where there might be every single person drafted. I'm interested in Javon Baker in a super deep league. Yeah. Let's just put it that way. 16 teams, 16 teams with like 50-man rosters. Yeah. Yes.
If Drake, man, and a lot of people who listen to this show certainly are about that life.
Right.
And Javon Baker will have some value there down the line. And what if
Drake
grows fast? If he grows fast, Javon Baker could be an integral part of this team.
And if Alex Van Pelt figures out offensive coordinating, all these things, like a confluence of great events.
Yeah.
So I want to revisit a question I was asked on the floor of the Fantasy Football Expo. I will be back there in August this year. I won't have to be asked this question, though. I'm going to pose it to you again. I know our listeners out there, and one in particular, had this very question for me at the Expo. Calvin Austin III, feel it or fuck it?
I'm feeling it. At his price, he's a better version of Wan'Dale Robinson, a more versatile receiver who can win more man-to-man at the boundary. He's a little quicker and faster than him, better route runner. And I think the Steelers have been intrigued with him, but injuries have been an issue. And then they had craptastic quarterback play, and there's a lot of revolving parts and coaches going in and out and all that kind of thing. And you look at him now, and I think it just depends on whether Arthur Smith is going to motion his receivers more often. He didn't do that in Atlanta very often, but he didn't have a quarterback who was very good at reading the field, so maybe didn't want to complicate things. If they feel like with Russell Wilson they can complicate things a little bit more, Calvin Austin might be a low-key wannabe Doug Baldwin type for Russell Wilson.
There's definitely some buzz this year, and obviously, you look at the pieces around him, and it's totally unresolved who even the wide receiver 2 is going to be there, whether you think
Van Jefferson
for right now. seems to be the guy. So, maybe it's Pat Freiermuth is that guy. I don't know. But yeah, so my answer this year is different from Calvin Austin than it was the last time I was asked that specific question. I don't know if I'm totally feeling him, but definitely not totally fucking him either. This is one to watch, especially given the changing circumstances. That's the thing about the NFL. It switches around. Things change.
Yeah, and you got to understand, I mean, with Pickens is your main guy. Freiermuth, you're right, is probably the number 2 guy. But who's going to be, Roman Wilson can block. Van Jefferson is kind of like his dad, which is, as I often talk about and kind of pick on, good route runner, not great hands, not very dynamic as a weapon. Austin can give you more at the boundary as a deep threat and more over the middle with his speed after the catch and skill. And I think Russell Wilson's going to find ways to get him the ball. I think we're going to see that a little bit more than we're going to see from guys like Jefferson or anybody else. And I think that will help Freiermuth too, because when you got one side of the field occupied with Austin inside, that's going to open things up for a guy like Freiermuth.
So if you're playing best ball and you get to that final pick, your 20th pick and underdog, there is a wide range of players available to you. And I think, one of the goals there is I want to find a guy who might give me 1 or 2 big weeks. And one of the guys who says, hey, I can do that is Noah Brown. I think he's being widely overlooked with the arrival of Stephon Diggs. I get it, but that whole receiving core last year had trouble staying in one piece over the course of time, including Noah Brown. He's wide receiver 103 right now, total free score play. How do you feel about him? Do you think there's a chance we're going to get a couple games like we saw last year?
Yeah, at the rate that injuries happen in the NFL, I'm taking a guy like that. Like if you're going to take a cuff or a backup who doesn't give you any value other than contingent value, get one that who is just basically going to blow the doors down when it happens. He's proven it for 2 years. I'm taking Noah Brown easily at that range because you've got a hyper twitched up Tank Dell, you've got a big bodied guy in Nico Collins, and an aging Stephon Diggs. There are 3 paths right there that are valid paths to playing time. So the rapport that he's got with CJ Stroud, that's one of those that I go, if I'm going to play it safe and pick a guy who doesn't have weekly starter value but has tremendous upside when he does get into a game, there's 3 opportunities for him to get into a game and be a rotational contributor of high level.
All right, fair enough. There you have it. That's it for this week. Again, you can find our work at footballguys.com. That article Matt put out just the end of the week, fantasy prospects under the ADP radar, 15 of them. We may talk about some more next week. I think they're all super interesting, and that's why we brought them up. You can catch my fantasy notebook also every Monday there, as well as my top 5 fantasy headlines on the Audible channel on YouTube every Friday afternoon. I kind of dig into 5 stories. Or are they the top stories? They are for me, and generally for fantasy.
And if
purposes.
they are for you, then they should be for everybody else, because you kind of have a good eye for this stuff.
I try to dig into things that are of great interest to fantasy managers, whether they're the top stories on the daily NFL Net. Oh wait, NFL Network doesn't do that anymore. Well, whatever the main headlines are on ESPN or whatever. So dig into that. Catch on the Audible channel. Great shows there as well from Cecil and Sig, and also the fantasy channel there. We got 3 channels, 3 YouTube channels.
Look back on your life when you were in high school. Did you want to go to the lunch table crowd, or did you want to go out to the smoking deck area, where the good music was, where people were telling you about all the fun things that you can do,
or I was playing
and all the corners that could be cut, all the little cheat codes in life. Some of them maybe might cheat you at the end of the day if it's a little too dangerous. But what was more fun? I would say, I would say Bob's going to lead you to the back wall at the school where all the kids are smoking and devising physics experiments that might play pranks on the teachers, but you're going to be winning.
That's it. That's the plan. So do all that. Check out our rankings, also available on Football Guys. Go to mattwaldman.com. Check out all the latest RSP if you haven't got in on the ongoing portions of that, the newsletter, the rankings, all that stuff. check it all out. Once again, Matt, give them pricing and things they need to know on that.
Sure. If you want the pre-draft, post-draft, which is probably the most long-term value thing, you're going to get that for $21.95 at mattwaldman.com. If you want the projections that are a good companion piece with it, that just give you the answers of how I rate every player in a build now, win now, or long-term dynasty environment with complete projections for everybody that I think that's going to be on a roster, you can get that for $24.95, and I give you updates twice, once in June, twice in August, sometimes 3 times in August, and then a couple of times during the fall, and then again probably in December or January, and then another one in June, just as a reminder. So you get a lot of info there at mattwaldman.com for $46.90. I think is the total price. You get you're basically getting 2 really in-depth analysis that's going to be updated along with newsletters and things like that. So, mattwaldman.com, and we definitely appreciate you. 19 years and going strong, heading into year 20.
It seems like just yesterday. All right, kids, that's it. It'll be just yesterday when we come back next Monday and think, wow, it's just like they were just here. But no, it will have been a week, and we'll see you then. Love you, Matt. Bye.
Love you. Bye.